Expert Exchange, and I'd like to welcome you. I'm Roger Firestein, Associate Professor Emeritus in the Creativity and Change Leadership Department at SUNY Buffalo State, for those of you that weren't here yesterday. I just want to say we're delighted we're welcoming over 250 participants from around the world. And for those of you who were not with us yesterday, I'd like to just give a little history. The Creativity Expert Exchange began in the late 1990s, and the intent was for faculty and alumni and current students to share some of their latest findings, both from research perspective and in the field of practice. And many of you were at those sessions in person. And over the years, we decided to extend the reach of the conference to individuals that are doing interesting work in just about any aspect of creativity, both within the department and from lots of other areas. So you're going to see a mix of that today. Now, when we use the word expert, we mean people that are working in the field of creativity, training, creativity innovation programs and organizations, and those of you who are passionate about how you can apply creativity in your life. And if that's you, you're in the right place. And that's you because I'm looking at all of you wonderful faces. Now, over the course of our two-day exchange, we're featuring two keynote speakers. We had a marvelous keynote speaker yesterday and more than 16 sessions from more than 25 presenters. And during the program, if you would just remember to mute your microphone, make sure that your name matches your registration. Turn your camera off if you do not wish to be recorded. Be in speaker view, communicate in the chat. And gentlemen, as yesterday, once again, please wear pants, particularly you, Mr. Vihar. Anyway, some of our concurrent sessions later in the program may ask you to keep your cameras on. Please do so. And that makes us feel great. So we love to see your smiling faces. I'm so delighted to see your faces this morning. So let's look at the schedule today. Our keynote address is going to begin in a few minutes. We'll have a meal break from 11:30 to 12:15 New York time. For those of you who are interested in the graduate program in creativity and change leadership, or the micro-credential, or the advanced certificate, or the master's degree program, Dr. Udis and Dr. Puccio will be able to chat in a designated Zoom room. And the link to that Zoom room is in the program and in the document we'll post in the chat box. During the meal break, the main room, this room that we're in right now, is going to remain open for anybody who wishes to network and connect with other people, have a meal, have a cup of coffee, talk with other folks at the conference. Our concurrent sessions will then begin at 12:15 to 1 o'clock in the New York time zone. We'll take a break from 1 o'clock to 1:15, followed by our second block of concurrent sessions, which runs from 1:15 to 2 o'clock, with a wrap-up of the conference from 2 o'clock to 2:15 in your current session rooms. Now, one more thing, and we're very excited about this. The faculty is inviting you to join our State of the Center presentation today from 2:15 to 3 o'clock. Thank you for the props there, Sue. We're going to be sharing some of the latest activities coming out of the department, such as the forthcoming doctoral program, our innovation suite, upcoming events, and current faculty works. Please go to the main C conference room from 2:15 to 3 o'clock New York time. We highly encourage you to attend. We're doing some cutting-edge research, cutting-edge work here. We're not able to squeeze that into the main program. We want to give you an opportunity to see what we're doing and what's happening, both in the center and as we're working out in the community and with various groups. The links to the concurrent session are found in the program and in the document we posted, and we're going to keep posting those links in the chat. And by the way, you're not obligated to go to the concurrent session that you indicated when you registered. This is a creativity conference. You can change your mind. You can go to any session that you want. Just follow the Zoom link. We're going to be conducting a graduate program information session for those of you interested in the graduate program on March 22nd from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock New York time. There's a separate Eventbrite registration site for this session, and the link and the registration information that will be in the chat box. And speaking of our graduate program, we'd like to show you a video that highlights one of our program graduates about how she used what she learned from studying here at the Center for Imagination. We'll watch that video now.
I had never been taught the way that I was taught in this program. And so really, even if I had any expectations coming in, they were blown out of the water on day one. My mind was blown open it was as if somebody had turned on a light, and I hadn't realized that until that day I had been navigating the world blind.
That is Ismet Mamnoon, who's doing amazing things with her work here that she learned from the center. So a little bit about the conference. We make the conference free. However, there are costs associated with running it, and we appreciate your contributions to help us to offset those costs. As I mentioned, we have over 280 registered participants at last count from more than a dozen countries. We want to welcome you. And so far, we've received about $2,000 in donations to support the conference. We thank you for your donations. If you haven't donated yet and you'd like to, you can still make a donation through Eventbrite, and you'd be using the same links that you used to register for CEE, and that's going to be available to next Friday. Now, because of the way the system is set up, you just need to re-register and select the donation level that's comfortable for you. All right, and we'd like to make a personal thanks, a special thanks to all of you who have already made donations. We really appreciate it. That helps us to keep the conference going. And speaking of the conference going, mark your calendars. The next Creativity Expert Exchange is planned for March 6 and 7, 2025. March 6 and 7, 2025. So away we go. To introduce our keynote speaker today, I'd like to introduce my former student, my friend, Dr. Gerard Puccio, SUNY Distinguished Service Professor, Director of the Center for Applied Imagination, Chair of the Department of Creativity and Change Leadership at Buffalo State University. And as I mentioned, Dr. Puccio is going to introduce our keynote speaker from today. Welcome, Dr. Puccio. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Firestein. This is about the only time we ever use titles, right?
Right.
But you're also in that enviable position, Raj, where you can point to almost every faculty member and say, I taught you, I taught you, I taught you, I taught you. So
Makes me proud. Thank you.
Longevity, my friend, longevity.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you.
So welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Creativity Expert Exchange. It gives me great pride to see how much this conference has grown from a small conference on the 4th floor of the Student Union. I think the first one was held in the late 1990s, early 2000s, something like that. And the impetus behind this came from our alumni who said to us, how many graduate programs can say this? Our students don't want to leave. I remember, in fact, several students delaying their graduation. I'm thinking of Diane Steele, whom I had a conversation with, and I said, Diane, can you please finish your master's project? And she said to me, you know what? I'm delaying the completion of my master's project because I don't want to go. So it's a very special climate that we create here at the Center for Applied Imagination. So it's my pleasure to introduce today's keynote speaker. Our keynote speaker is our newest faculty member, Dr. Melodi Ozyaprak, who is now into her 2nd semester at the Center for Applied Imagination. And I have to say, it's a delight to have Melodi on faculty after she is done teaching her morning courses. She often pops into my office. Her feet are hardly touching the ground, and she regales in telling me stories about how wonderfully well her courses have gone that morning. So it's a delight to have someone who takes so much joy and pleasure in teaching. So a little bit about Dr. Ozyaprak. She specializes in creativity and its education with a specific focus on domain-specific creativity in mathematics. She has expertise in conducting research on topics such as creativity, curriculum development, and gifted education. Her research explores the impact of creativity techniques and the use of creative cognition, both general and domain-specific, on the development and manifestation of individuals' creative potential. She comes to us with a stellar set of achievements, some I'd like to highlight. In Turkey, she played a pivotal role in writing, and I'm going to say this with some emphasis, the country's first official creativity and thinking skills programs, incorporating creativity into the education programs of public and prestigious private schools, and collaborating as a group member and leader in crafting curricula focused on developing high-level skills. Prior to joining Buffalo State University, Dr. Ozyaprak worked at Johns Hopkins University while serving as the Associate Director of the Research Department at Johns Hopkins University. Dr. Ozyaprak conducted research on various topics, including creativity, talent search, diversity, equity, and inclusion in education. Dr. Ozyaprak has taught a variety of courses, including development of creativity, theories of creativity, developing higher order thinking skills in gifted individuals, teaching critical thinking, teaching mathematics to gifted elementary students. So you can see from this bio how impressive Dr. Ozyaprak is. But let me share with you a personal story, which I think further reinforces how impressive she is. Melodi lives just a few blocks away from where Pam and I live. And a couple weeks ago, Melodi joined us for dinner. My son Gabriel was there with his girlfriend Jess. They've been together for a couple of years. Jess is a nurse at a leading cancer institute, Roswell Park Institute, if you're familiar with that cancer research center here in Buffalo. We spent a couple of hours together, and then Melodi left. And then as we tend to do, debriefing dinner afterwards, Jess couldn't stop talking about Melodi and how Melodi is a researcher. She is a real researcher. I'm like, you've known me for 2 years. I'm a SUNY distinguished professor. You've never said that about me. And so Melodi has remarkable interpersonal skills and made a very strong impression about her research prowess on my son's girlfriend. So Melodi is going to share with us her expertise around creativity training and creativity education. Before I turn it over to Melodi, we're going to play another 30-second video from a graduate student. And in this video, there's an Easter egg, a hidden point. I selected this video because it directly ties into one of the key points that Melodi is going to touch on in terms of what makes for effective creativity training. So we will hear from Matt Zayas, one of our alumni, in this video. So here we go.
This is unique and different, and just I was very surprised that more people didn't know about this. Working with the faculty, whether it was as a grad assistant or whether it was helping them out with a facilitation project, they always made me feel like a partner. They always valued my input, and the reason is because when we're talking about creativity, it's all about diverse perspectives and evaluating all of those fairly and consistently.
So thank you, Matt. So Matt went on, after graduating from our department, he went on to a position, as you could see, maybe, those of you familiar with Buffalo, he was standing in Buffalo's City Hall. He works in the City Hall and is connected to the mayor's office. At the end of that clip, you heard him talk about diverse perspectives, but also that being balanced with evaluation. I think this is one of the points, because I had a preview of Melodi's keynote. This will be one of the points that Melodi will touch on. So before I turn it over to Dr. Ozyaprak, I will remind the audience, if you have questions for Melodi, please drop them into the chat box. I will be monitoring the chat box at the end of Melodi's presentation. She and I will have a dialogue, and I'll take some of your questions and pose them to Dr. Ozyaprak. So without further ado, welcome, Dr. Ozyaprak, and I'm going to turn the presentation over to you for your keynote.
Thank you, Dr. Puccio. Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Puccio, for that generous introduction. I'm truly grateful for your kind words and for your son's girlfriend's kind words as well. So it's a pleasure to be here today, and I am so excited to share some thoughts on the enhancement of creativity and discuss the key components to ensure that with all of you. Let me share my screen very quick. Here it is. Perfect. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about today the research and my experiences for the curricula we wrote with our teams, and I wrote to enhance creative creativity education, creative performance, sorry. So we all know that I think creativity is important, and it's important with different levels. At individual level is important because it's relevant to solving real life problems of we have, or just for well-being or self-actualization. At the organizational level, innovation, I mean, all businesses need innovation to be able to deal with the change. At the societal level, creative individuals are our pioneers who progress in science, technology, and arts. At the global level, creative accomplishments help to build a more interactive world that fortifies human civilization. And of course, there are other implications at the educational level as well. So the significance of creativity as a crucial skill and human potential has made it a sought-after attribute, especially after World War II and Sputnik in the United States. And of course, we should also respect Guilford because he suggested to study creativity psychometrically. And it has been valued by different people from various professions like managers, politicians, employees, scholars, and educators. And it's getting more and more important in the times of rapid technological, cultural, and societal changes. And of course, this increased interest put an emphasis on training creativity in the educational and organizational context. And you see here that the heightened focus on creativity has gone to that extent that even OECD decided to include a creativity assessment in the famous PISA test starting 2022, which is hoped to increase the pressure on schools to equip their students with creative skills. And for the first time in PISA, which is very interesting, some items will require students to produce a visual artifact, not even verbal, rather than construct a written response or choose the correct answer. And the assessment, this creativity assessment, will only include open-ended tasks with no single solution. So this in turn has demanded more complex scoring methods based on rubrics and sample responses that were informed by the collection and analysis of responses of many students around the world. So it is not an easy job to evaluate this assessment at all. And it's very different what OECD were doing priorly. But despite these challenges, OECD chose to add creativity assessments. So we should ask ourselves, why? Why is it important for students to develop creative thinking? And then OECD's explanation is in the school system, creative thinking can have a positive influence on students' academic interest and achievement, also identity and social emotional development. And then they say that in their website, Beyond the Classroom, fostering creative thinking equips individuals to navigate a world that's constantly and swiftly evolving. So they are aware of the importance of creativity. And they think that cultivating people's creative thinking skills not only prepares them for the future workforce, but also empowers them to actively contribute to the advancement of societies that they are part of. So we see here that in a global context, organizations and communities are progressively reliant on innovation and knowledge creation to tackle these emerging challenges. And then this underscores the collective importance of innovation and creative thinking as crucial components in addressing these challenges. So that being the case, it is necessary for us, for practitioners, researchers, educators, maybe administrators, to discuss two basic issues, and one of them, how successful are we to support creative behavior or to enhance creative potential? And secondly, what are the components of the success in creativity training, aka how do we enhance creativity? And today I'm hoping that we will be exploring the latest research and discussing the best practices that can make a real difference in the attempt to enhance creativity. Now, to start to this discussion, I would love to share this beautiful graph here. When I saw it, I mean, I already knew it, but when I saw it, I got really impressed because here you can see this sharp increase at the around the 1950s. So this is a graph for the relative frequency of the term creativity in books in English between 1800 and 2019. And I mean, strikingly, before about 1950, there were approximately 0 articles, books, essays, classes, anything of the sort dealing explicitly with the subject of creativity. And that's amazing to see, I think. And of course, especially in the United States, after the Sputnik and World War II, creativity started to be talked about a lot. And then yes, we started to talk about creativity around 1950s, but the focus on enhancing creativity in any organization or in any educational setting gained attraction globally in the early 90s. So you see here that there's a 40-year gap that. And what happened in that gap? The recognition and incorporation of creativity into education happened, but it took some time. It was a gradual process that evolved over time. Initially, education systems were often more focused on traditional and standardized approaches. So it took a shift in understanding and pedagogical philosophy to appreciate the importance of fostering creativity in people and to understand that we can really enhance this potential. So we already are born with it. It's an innate ability, but we can always enhance it. We can always support it so it shows itself. It manifests itself. And factors such as advancement in cognitive psychology, the acknowledgement of diverse learning styles, and a growing awareness of the significance of creativity in problem solving contributed to this evolution in educational practices. So and I'm going to mention a little bit about also Turkey, because the focus on creativity education gained attraction worldwide around 90s, but it reached to Turkey in the 2000s. And in our department, creativity was considered a core skill in our program, placing it at the heart of the curriculum. And our department was the gifted education department. So it was the first undergraduate gifted education program for teachers in the world and in Turkey as well. But like I said, creativity was the heart of it, because if you're familiar a little bit with gifted education, teaching higher education thinking skills in gifted education is very essential, and creativity is, of course, the most important of them. So apart from starting the gifted education department, our department also initiated the first creativity curriculum in both higher education and elementary levels, starting in 2002. And we had graduate students, of course, and then they had the chance to practice and reinforce creativity by guiding our students in the pilot school, the first magnet school for gifted students in Turkey, in grades 1 to 8 during practicum courses. There was a distribution in each class where about each 2 children had an undergraduate student to guide them. So they also received a complex creativity training. So both our undergrad students and our elementary and secondary level students received a training program. And it was a complex training program because it's important. I'm emphasizing it, and I'm going to mention you in a bit why it is so important to have a complex creativity training program. So for us, I would say that it was a journey for us to build this program, and then to kind of convince the Ministry of Education in Turkey to have a curriculum for gifted education, both for creativity or critical thinking skills. It was filled with sweat and tears because it wasn't easy, but eventually creativity has been integrated into school curricula in Turkey, because we wrote the first national creativity core curriculum, and starting as early as age 5 with our efforts. And now, if we go back to the world, presently worldwide, various government initiatives and partnerships are actively fostering individual and collective creativity. And then these initiatives often bring together diverse fields such as technology, such as art, science. We have a word called STEAM or STEM. And then in recent years, many new creativity enhancement approaches have been tested, such as using virtual reality techniques to enhance creativity, or the Om mantra from the meditation, or using cognitive enhancement drugs in addition to complex training programs. So we have had several interventions to be able to support creativity, because we understood how important it is. But the key question is here: yes, we have had all these interventions, but how effective are these enhancement approaches? Or are these attempts successful at all? Like, are we doing a good job? Are we really achieving what we aim to? So this takes us to another question. And then that question is, what does it mean for creativity programs or trainings or any kind of intervention attempt to enhance creativity to be successful? What is the meaning of success in terms of creativity interventions? So of course, we are all aware that the success, the meaning of the success or the success itself can be measured in various ways, depending on the audience, the goal, the objectives for the program or the organization. And of course, various groups are going to have, such as researchers, administrators, or like politicians may harbor distinct expectations for the success. But even though their expectations may vary, we still have some overlapping indicators of success for attempts to enhance creativity. If you look at here, for example, real world impact, like everybody wants their participants to kind of learn, to be able to implement what they have learned in terms of creativity in their programs, to innovative projects or products or solutions. Or of course, everybody wants them kind of to improve their capacity to ask the right questions or to find the effective and the most unique solutions. And then, of course, production of original ideas and potentially workable solutions, especially for ill-defined problems. Or another indicator of creativity success, like the enhanced creative thinking skills in general, or the application of creative strategies, because you can, that's what I observed with my students. Yes, sometimes some of them had already some higher potential for creative thinking skills, and then some of them gained it throughout our education. But I think it's also very important to teach them that we have all these tools to be able to ignite our creative potential, like strategies that have been written in the literature for so many years. So it's also important for them to be aware of these strategies, to be aware of their own limitations and strengths in terms of creative thinking, and to be able to have this access to these tools, to strategies when they really need. So to know that, oh, if I have that type of problem, now I can use this and this strategy. So this is also another indicator of success. Other than that, just even a shift in the attitude towards challenges and our uncertainties is also important, because we all want that the participants of our trainings or whatever intervention we are doing, we want them to become more comfortable with the ambiguity, for example, because life is ambiguous. You know, it happens all the time that all kind of challenges, they come and we are not very prepared for them. So even that shift in the attitude is very important. Another common indicator of success across different groups is overall satisfaction or overall enjoyment or overall perceived value of the program. And of course, the collaborative creativity, you know, it's important. It kind of indicates the success if after our training or after our intervention, our participants will be able to engage in collaborative creativity. So these are important and overlapping indicators, but I also want to emphasize and highlight one thing here. As researchers, we also have a distinct standpoint, and it is very important for us when we are talking about the success of anything, including creative training programs or any kind of, like I said, intervention. We like quantified data. So for us, it's important to be able to talk in numbers. And then how we measure it, we usually measure the success by the magnitude of the change, which this change can be measured from any of the indicators I mentioned earlier. It can be change in means in general of the performance gains on relevant instruments. It can be change in means and the creative performance, but this change in the means should be, of course, statistically significant, or sometimes we use the variance explained, you know, the change. So we have this all quantified data to be able to evaluate the success of creativity. And I wanted to highlight this because we are going to talk about research. And this research and these researchers who care a lot about the numbers, and they really focus on like some meaningful increases in the scores or in the performance after participants getting the trainings. And this research indicates that the evidence gathered over the past 50, 60 years does suggest that creativity can be improved. So this is important. Maybe you will say to yourself that we already know that creativity can be improved, but think about from the researcher's standpoint, and up until the late 90s, whether creative thinking can be enhanced was debated among researchers. So we weren't so sure about it because we were asking these questions and we were seeking to have some numbers. But after 90s, researchers kind of have been convinced that we can really enhance creativity. So we have considerable consensus nowadays that various methods can improve creative thinking, but we have little consensus on how creativity is enhanced. And what I mean with that, while there is a considerable consensus that various methods can enhance creative thinking, there is still limited agreement on how exactly it is improved. What are the most effective methods? Yes, we know that we can do some magic with creativity enhancement methods, but we don't necessarily know what kind of magic we are doing. So that part of the literature has a little consensus. And there are reasons for this little consensus. One of them, the reviews like that have been, especially the integrative reviews about creativity enhances methods, have yielded some contradictory findings. And one of the main reasons of it, there is a lot of techniques, there is a lot of approach to enhance creativity in the field. And then because there is not enough replications, or we don't have some consistent studies, because of this, it's harder for us researchers to systematically observe change in similar desired outcomes coming from similar creativity enhancing efforts. So not having this consistency, not having this enough replication to tell us that if we do this, we have this much change. Because of not having that, it restricts us for doing some philosophical discussions about what the outcome of any creativity intervention should be, or about the generalizable data on how exactly creativity is improved. And when we discuss how exactly creativity is improved and the most effective methods are still unclear, we are trying to figure out which type of interventions used to support creativity truly deliver positive results. Because like I said, there is a huge variety. For example, let's look at here. We have approaches to encourage creativity, like provisioning of effective incentives, which means that providing rewards, benefits, or motivations that encourage individuals or entities to be more creative. We also have the acquisition of requisite expertise. That means obtaining the necessary and essential knowledge, skills, and proficiency required for being creative. We also have these approaches in the literature, effective structuring of group interactions, and optimization of climate and culture. And eventually, of course, we have the training to enhance creativity. So as you can see here, if we have this much variety, and if we don't have any replication of the studies showing that these are really working, it's harder for us to make generalizations from the researcher's standpoint. And I'm going to say one thing about trainings. Yes, training is one of them. Training to enhance creativity is one of the approaches. And it is one of the most preferred, if not favored, approach for enhancing creativity. So training has always been the favorite child, both among practitioners and researchers, for several reasons. However, even within the training methods, there is significant diversity still, For example, let me show you the scope of creativity trainings here. If you look at the research, for example, there is a variety in terms of content. There are figural trainings, there are verbal trainings, the content-wise, or spatial trainings. or the trainings that focus on different cognitive processes, like some trainings focus on divergent thinking solely, some trainings focus on convergent thinking, and some trainings prefer to focus on both of them together, you know? And then if you look at the 4P from the Rhodes creativity model, some trainings focus just the product. They try to teach their participant how to come up, how to generate like creative products and what it means. Some focus on the process, the cognitive processes or thinking skills and strategies, so to say. Some focus on press, like environmental condition and how we can improve it to support creativity. And some focus on the personal characteristics. So even within the trainings, we have all this variety, which kind of makes our life harder as researchers, you know. As practitioners, it's easier maybe to see the change, but for the research, from the research standpoint, we need some really nice and loud data to tell us that, yes, this is really working. And of course, I always think this kind of variety, like the Russian nesting doll, if you know it, you know, there's one, another doll comes after you pull the other doll. So we have these layers upon layers of variety. And as you can see here in this slide, some of these trainings, there are generally 3 types of trainings. Some of them are the complex courses or trainings. Some of them are the just short trainings about particular creativity techniques, such as brainstorming or mind mapping. Some of them are short courses with fewer than like 5-6 sessions. So the difference between them and single method training, they have the selection of tools, and then but they have the shorter time to practice, for the participant to practice these tools or strategies, and they don't necessarily have a theoretical background for their rationale to choose these tools. You know, they just say that, oh, we think that these strategies work to enhance creativity, so let's apply those ones, or let's teach those ones to our students or employees. So as you can see, these 3 main training types are the most cited training ones. And then now it brings us to another question, of course. Okay, so we have these 3 major categories in creativity training, and then which one is more effective? Again, we kind of circle back to our question. Like, is it evident that whether undergoing complex training is more effective than quickly acquiring specific creativity techniques? If that is the case, does this apply universally to all creativity techniques, or some of them equally as effective as complex trainings, or perhaps some of them even more effective than the other techniques? So questions never end. And we are used to it because we are the people in the creativity field. So we know that asking questions is the best way to kind of get the better answer, but we have to ask these questions. And of course, researchers ask themselves these questions, and then they tackle some answers. But let's remember, this is the main question: how creativity can be most efficiently enhanced. It's important because both organizations and educational institutions have invested substantial time, money, and resources in the development and deployment of creative training. So it's a question of efficiency and effectiveness that we need to kind of figure the answers. So now I'm going to take you to a little tour in the literature. So throughout the years, to be able to answer these questions, we have had some consistent results, we have had some changing results, and we have had some new findings, you know, brand new findings. So I want to share with you these results and this change. So what remained same? What are the consistent results in the literature in terms of how to enhance creativity most effectively or efficiently? So the research says that complex courses and trainings were the most effective approach to train creativity. And this is an accepted consistent result. Especially the interventions that use theoretical models are more effective than using independent techniques to train participants. So that's a very important finding, which means that I'm going to mention about it a little bit more soon, but it means that if you are choosing a set of strategies to enhance creativity, you should be able to explain us why you chose them. Is there any research basis for it? Is there any theoretical basis for it? Because research indicates that we need that basis. to be able to ensure that our training is going to be successful. We're going to do a good job to support creativity. Another consistent result in literature, the domain-specific trainings enable more creativity for domain-specific activities or tasks in comparison to domain general trainings. So if you're not familiar with these terms, let me give you a little bit explanation. Domain general trainings means that you have the strategies to enhance creativity in general. For example, teaching your participants scamper technique and then having them to generate more ideas, for example. But there is not necessarily a specific context here. It can be everything. It can be a daily life problem. It may be some problem that they want to work on. So you don't specify the context. You just teach them the techniques. The domain-specific trainings, on the other hand, means that you are teaching them to be creative in math, for example, like I studied, or in science in general, or in art. And sometimes for some participants, it is possible to transfer the skills and strategies they learned in the domain general trainings, but for some participants, it is more challenging. So they may not easily and spontaneously take these techniques that they learn in the domain general trainings and use them when they are doing mathematics. That's one of the challenges. And the other thing with the domain-specific trainings, sometimes some domains like math require some creativity strategies that are different than domain general strategies. So math has its own way to be creative sometimes. So I think this is very important. So what this result tells us that if we're going to teach if we want to enhance our participants' creativity, and if we want them to be creative in a certain context, so we should make sure that we are going to teach them how to transfer those skills to that context, or we're going to teach them how to be creative in that certain specific domain. So these are very, very interesting findings, and these are consistent. These never changes. We always come up to the same conclusion over and over. So there are the other consistent results. And for example, while different interventions have similarly positive impacts on the diverse aspect of divergent thinking, there is a pattern emerges. So research indicates that the contribution of creativity training is most evident in the qualities of fluency and originality of creative products. This is something that research has been consistent for a while. And another consistent result is that creativity can be trained in adulthood, which is a great result. I love this one a lot because it shows that it is never too late. You can always enhance someone's creative potential regardless of his or her age, and it's very interesting. There are also some findings that trainings are more effective in occupational samples than in student samples. And I think this ties on the domain-specific creativity part, because these people kind of have the need to use those strategies about creativity in their context, and then because they have this motivation, I think they are doing a better job to transfer it to the context that they are working on. So these are very, very interesting and, of course, optimistic results, I think. But we have some changing results as well, For example, previously, training programs, previously the research was indicating that the training programs that focused on problem solving were most effective than programs focusing on attitude or behavior. So they were favoring focusing on the problem solving part of the trainings. But new research says that it's not just the case, just focusing on the attitude or behavior aspect is as effective as focusing on the problem solving part. For example, just telling people to be creative, just giving them this instruction and encouraging them are effective. Of course, they are less effective than teaching creative cognition, but especially if you consider the low effort required with this manipulation, just telling them to be creative and it's working somehow, or maybe being more specific and saying that, can you come up with as many and as various ideas as possible? So it's good to know for, I think, organizational, it's good to for organizational and educational settings, and so that they can be, for example, try to motivate their participants to be more creative before a brainstorming session, and it can still result a beneficial in output. So I think this is a very nice and important, significant changing result. The other changing result, which is, I think, more significant and might be more important. So there's always this ongoing debate whether or not divergent thinking is fully necessary and sufficient for creative thought. And then many scholars stress the need for supporting cognitive activities such as critical thinking or convergent thinking. We have had enough evidence over the last 50 years that the divergent thinking does indeed represent a distinct capacity to contribute to both creative problem solving and many forms of creative performance. But we didn't have that much evidence coming for convergent thinking. But new studies indicated that convergent thinking, focusing on convergent thinking, might be as effective as focusing on divergent thinking, which is a great, I think this makes a lot of sense, but finally research came to this point. And especially the methods that included both convergent and divergent thinking are effective for trainings, which we know this from creative problem solving. We know how it is important to emerge those to cognition, to be able to come up with a creative solution and idea and to be able to implement it. So these are the changing results, and we have some brand new findings. One of them, on average, cultural exposure, like sending your students or employees for an exchange program, and meditation were similarly highly effective, which is very interesting. And the explanation in literature for that, because they directly affect people's creative mindsets. For example, if you do meditate, if you have your participants meditate, and then you they kind of get more relaxed, and because of that, they feel more constraint-free, and because of that, associations, especially the far ones that we like, can flow more easily. I think that's very interesting. So having this, focusing on this environmental aspect of creativity, research shows that leads to a better cognitive adjustment to a creative task, resulting in a higher level of creativity. Very, very positive finding. I find this very positive. Another one, which we already knew it, but I think this is also, this part of it is new. If a trainer was present during the enhancement method, the effect was stronger than if no trainer was present. So if for example, if you tell your participants to learn to practice creativity without a trainer, or if you tell them like to kind of learn it via some online courses, but without a trainer, it's going to be less effective rather than having a facilitator or trainer to kind of walk them through the training. So this is also very important. And it also, I think it also highlights the importance of the trainers, like how experienced they are, how much, what is their approach to creativity in general? What are their attitudes or mindset about creativity? You know, are they accomplished enough to be able to facilitate some creativity activities? So these are some questions that we need to think about. Other interesting finding, a new finding, apparently figural methods are more effective than verbal methods. So if when you have figural content to be able to kind of practice creativity, it's going to be more effective than having a verbal content. And this effect sometimes explains, you know, due to pictures eliciting more emotions compared to words. But of course, I mean, which supports broader idea generation. But of course, we can think about it like more, but not for this presentation. But I found this very interesting because we have this visual people, also we have this figural people, we have this verbal people, you know, so there is a little bit, it's not very clear to me right now, but I just wanted to share it with you because I think it's a very interesting finding. And finally, as a new finding, mindset altering and environment changing efforts work as good as cognitive enhancement. So this is also one of the very important findings, I think. So as a conclusion, from this consistent findings, changing findings, and new findings, we can say that boosting creativity doesn't come from a single perfectly designed training session. Instead, it involves adapting to the specific environment and understanding the cognitive and motivational needs of the creative individual. While we know a lot of the methods, we still need a further detailed analysis to be able to enhance the effectiveness of these methods, which means that we still need more consistent systematic studies for us to be able to make some reasonable generalizations about the type of the intervention, about the conditions under which the interventions work. We also need some case studies and, of course, qualitative data telling us the story and reality behind the numbers. So how participants do feel about the training? What kind of changes do they observe in themselves after the training? So I think we also need those kind of information to be able to understand how to enhance creative potential or how to support creative behavior. And I think the most important highlight in this research finding is the complex trainings. Because the research studies show us that the complex training is the most effective method. And so we kind of are curious about the definition of complex training. What does complex training mean? So there are, of course, several definitions, but one of the most basic one is that complex training is a systematic process or a program through which a person acquires specific creativity skills. So it necessitates the systematic acquisition of attitudes, concepts, knowledge, role, or skills that result in improved creative performance at work, school, or real life. So when you provide your participants complex training, your participants are expected to gain deeper insights into their thinking processes. So it has a metacognitive part. So after the long complex trainings, long and nicely planned and having a basis, so your participants start to realize their own limitations, their own strengths, and then their needs to be more creative. And then you give them the chance to practice everything, not just the cognition, not just the thinking skills, but the concepts relevant to creativity, attitudes relevant to creativity, knowledge, roles, everything. So this complex training approach works because it kind of helps, because it aligns with the multifaceted aspect of creativity. So it helps participants to work on all the elements mentioned here in order to be revealed. And then speaking of complex trainings, now I want to share with you one of my experiences. Like Dr. Puccio mentioned, we wrote the first national creativity curriculum. And I think it is the only creativity core curriculum in the world. I have never heard that some countries having a core curriculum in creativity, so it's pretty unique, I think. But of course, when we were writing that curriculum, we followed the research. Even there wasn't data back in then about this complex training programs, but we followed the main logic, and we said that we want to establish we want to kind of base our program to some theoretical foundations. So let me mention a little bit about the background first before I explain this example. So we as a team established the first magnet school for the gifted in Turkey. And then in this school, we introduced our students, our elementary and secondary level students, 3 essential classes. One of them was the creative thinking. The other one was the thinking class, but it was mainly including the analytical, practical, and critical thinking, which is the convergent thinking part. So we had the divergent thinking part, we have the convergent thinking part, and the third one was a social emotional progress. And apart from these courses, we also collaborated with the teachers of that school to differentiate the curriculum across all domains, because what research says, it says that it should be also domain specific. So we collaborated with the teachers to incorporate creativity into all domains. So that was the other thing we did. And while we are doing this, we based our program on Guilford's beautiful structure of intellect model and also 4 definitions of creativity. Now, what is the, let me show you the definitions. I'm not gonna go in the definitions, but one of them was the Torrance famous definition, and the others were these 3 definitions. Why I put them here? Because every activity we wrote, every learning outcome we wrote for that curriculum was tying up to this. It had a basis in these definitions. So if you go back to the structure of intellect model that our curriculum is rooted, so it is Guilford's intelligence model. So he proposed basically 5 major functions and processes associated with the ability to think. So he broke down the thinking abilities into convergent thinking, divergent thinking, cognition, memory, and evaluative abilities. And when he addressed the then somewhat controversial proposal that creative performance in individuals could be enhanced. So however, you know, like even though educational practices predominantly encourage students to seek conventional answers, he proposed this model and he wanted to get more attention for the especially divergent thinking part. And of course, Mary Meeker, if you were familiar with the name, she was the one who elaborated on Guilford's theories by further applying his model to educational settings and conditions. And we use both Guilford's materials and Mary Meeker's materials as a basis, as a foundation for our program. So with this model, which is proposing that intelligence consists of 150 independent abilities that result from the interaction of these 5 operations that I mentioned, and 6 products, units, classes, relations, systems, transformation, implications, and 5 contents, visual, auditory, symbolic, semantic, and behavioral. So through these diverse activities and interactions, we could better evaluate, understand, and improve our students' thinking skills. So this was very important for us. And now I also want to show you this one. So here you see a table, let me see it too. You see a table that shows the distributions of the learning outcomes for levels of complexity. So units, so let me explain this. So the product dimension shows the outcomes of specific operations being applied to specific items in a specific order. The basic one, the most basic one in units, the most complex one is the implications, transformation and implication. So what we wanted, since we predominantly use divergent, convergent, and evaluative thinking operations in our creativity and thinking skill courses, we have distributed the products students will apply these operations to across grade levels in a way that becomes more complex as they age. So our main goal was to introduce variety into product categories, aiming to enhance the complexity of learning outcomes, complexity of the operations in the throughout the years. So if you see here, the number of the learning outcomes for the units, classes, and relations are decreasing across the grades, and the systems, transformation, and implications are increasing across the grades because we want them to be able to use the operations for more complex products throughout the years. And if you realize at the end of the table, we have this creative problem solving and feature problem solving sections, which means that starting by 4th grade, we also introduced to this creative problem solving, and in the 6th grade, we introduced them feature problem solving, because these two, creative problem solving and feature problem solving, provided students with the opportunity to simultaneously focus on different levels of input and output in the product. So with this, we enabled us to expose our students to various complex levels of information as both input and output, aka product, exactly as it happens in real life. Okay, so now I want to share you some little examples. So this is an example of how our lesson plans look like. And I'm going to show you an example for units, an example for class and relations. For the units are the and the least complex of the products. And with the units, when you are working with units, you want your students to use the information to create a singular thing, like it can be a singular word, a singular figure. And here, for example, with the first activity, the learning outcome was creating new combinations of shapes by utilizing pre-discovery forms. And on the left-hand side, you see this pre-discovery forms of several shapes. And on the right-hand side, we provided teacher with some example products that we expect students to come with. So here you see that students are expected to make as varied and as much as combinations to be able to come up with one singular figure. This is why this was under the unit section, unit category. And while we were sharing these activities with teachers, we were also sharing them the suggestions to link these domain general activities to domain specific content. For example, we said that if you are studying this learning outcome with your students in the creativity class, try to make a link to the science core curriculum 3rd grade learning outcome, saying that students explains the invention process, students will design their creative solutions to everyday challenges. So we wanted them to explicitly make these connections to their students, so students' metacognitions can be increased. Another example, and this one is going to come from the classes. So classes follows units, and they are recognized as a set of items of information grouped together by virtue of their common properties. So classes are a concept that we use a lot in science, because when you are doing science or when you are doing research, you take these several examples and you try to kind of cluster them and label them with an abstract concept to be able to put them under a category. And to be able to do this, what we were doing with our students, we were working with emotions, for example. So we were giving them some worksheets, and then there were labels on the worksheets, like emotions, anger and sadness and disappointment. And we were asking our students to list all the words or phrases that they use to express their emotions, to express their angers, or to express their sadness. And after first of all, we want them to diverge their thinking and find alternative expressions for the same concept. And then what we wanted them to create new expressions for the giving emotions. And we also wanted them to see how this various words or phrases come together, make a cluster, and fall under a category. And also we wanted them to see how different people may use different phrases or different words to express for themselves. So it has also this enrichment aspect. And for the relation part, so relations in the structure of intelligence are connections between units of informations based on the variables or points of contact that apply to them. So with the relations, for example, if you have a chair itself is just a unit, but if you have a desk, and chair and desk, they present a relation. So we wanted to kind of see them to the relations or create the relations. So with this learning outcome, we wanted them establishing symbolic relationships between words, meanings, and their written forms. And let me show you this. Here you see, I put an example here for you. So in the middle, it is in the middle, the image you see means phone. It is telephone in Turkish. And as you can see in this telephone word, there are these wires, because what they did, we wanted them to do this, to alter the written version of phone in a manner that establishes a connection with its meaning. Because when we are talking about phone, we need the wires. And at the end of the word, there is this N, and it turned to a phone box, So we wanted them to make this far association, a far connection between the word itself, written version of word, and the meaning. So this was one of the, I think, good examples of our activities. So if we cycle back to our questions for this presentation, we asked ourselves, how successful are we support to creative behavior? And we talked about we are successful and to enhance creativity, but we are not sure right now that what is the best method, but what research indicates that we are pretty sure that the complex training models are the most effective ways to enhance creativity. And indeed, of course, as researchers, we also did some studies to be able to measure the success of our program, the success of our curriculum, the success of our schools. And one of the ways to measure the success, we use the satisfaction surveys. And then the satisfaction surveys for the 200 graduates of our schools, they were all gifted students, and then they were identified by us. They got this 8-year training by having this creativity, critical thinking, analytical thinking, convergent thinking trainings. And at the end of the 8th grade, out of 200 students, 79.5% of them stated that they liked their school. 81% of them say that they spent quality time at school. 59.8 of the students, percent of students say that education their school have at school, the education they have at school sufficient. And the ones who didn't think that this, the education wasn't that sufficient, they wanted to have more extracurricular activities. And this was a challenge that we had with the Ministry of Education, because Ministry of Education is central in Turkey and they have their own way, they have their restrictions. They say that you cannot do more than, let's say, 5 hours a week for extracurricular activities, but our students want it, but because of the political reasons, there is also this bureaucracy part too. We couldn't manage to add more extracurricular activities, and it showed itself in the survey because our students wanted for it. 82.2% of our students thinks that their school gives them support for success in extracurricular activities, which is an interesting finding because they knew that we were trying to give them, but also they were aware that our hands were, held. And then 81.5% of students reported an increase in their creative and critical thinking skills. And this shows that our students also had awareness. And of course, we had tools to check that if their creativity and critical thinking skills really increased. We didn't just follow their information, what they provided us. So what we did, we tested our students' creative potential, critical thinking skills, and also analytical thinking skills consistently. First, we tested them in the 1st grade, then we checked in the 5th grade, and we checked at the 8th grade. And there was a statistically significant change, increase in the mean scores. So that showed that their creativity and critical thinking skills really increased. And that also shows that they are aware of that, which was the metacognition part. And I think it was very impressive that their student knew how their abilities were changing. They had this observation skill. That was really nice. And throughout their education, our school garnered awards in innovation, STEM, art, and mathematics Olympiad. These are the real life examples that we talked about, the implication of success previously. Even though there was no conclusive research, anecdotal evidence suggested that most students gained admission to reputable high schools and universities. Some even have had some prestigious awards in cinema, music, and dance. And then this one is so precious to me. Some of our graduates are doing their PhD in the US right now, because when I started to work with them, they were 5 or 6 years old, and now they became adults. And 2 of them are doing their PhD. One of them is doing their PhD in UMass in math, and the other is in California, Berkeley, for the psychology. And I have been collaborating with these 2 graduates for scholarly publications, and our one of our publications is about to be published. So that's to me a good implication of success. Sorry. And another one, and I learned this recently, it's very interesting, synchronicity in life. So a couple days ago, I was also telling Gerard that a couple days ago, a graduate of our undergrad program reached out to me, and she said that she and the other 3 graduates of our undergraduate program have been working as teachers for this private school in Turkey, a prestigious one. And then they got this, I think they got 3 or 4 awards from the Destination Imagination competition, which is a famous competition for creativity that are held in United States. So that was just, I said, wow, that's just so incredible to know. And then there's another also result that I want to share with you. It's about undergrad graduates for our major in gifted education. So when we did this, we study between 2000, sorry, when we did the study at 2015, our 300, we studied with 300 undergraduate students who received education, and 88% of them went on to pursue a profession. And these professions included elementary school teacher in the public school system, elementary school teacher in the private school system, subject teacher in club programs or magnet schools, being a creativity teacher in club programs or magnet schools, scholar, administrators. So they all, almost 88% were like, had this success in real life. And then an impressive 93% of them still actively applied. They said that they still actively apply the creativity skills they learned during their undergraduate studies in their daily and professional lives. So they learned to keep them and to transform them into their lives. It shows that the education, the training was long lasting as well. So yeah. Technically, this was what a complex training literally means. And I also wanted to add one more thing before I end my presentation here. So we discussed about the components of the success in creative training and how do we enhance creativity. And we learned that the type of intervention really matters. And research tells us that one of the interventions that's most effective is the complex training ones. But there are many other interventions out there to be avoiding, to kind of be researched properly, to be analyzed properly, and to show us that they can also make some difference, you know, in participants' creativity. But there are also 3 other components that I'm not going to talk about today, but I just want to kind of pay attention to those. One of them, even if you had the best type of intervention, differentiating the curriculum, which means like having a meaningful context that participants can transfer those skills that they gain from that intervention is very important. The other one is the trainers. And the last one is the organizational setting, planning, and support. When you are trying to support creativity, it's very important that from the janitor to the administrator or CEO, everyone should be willing to support creativity, and everyone should model these creative behaviors and try to practice creativity in their organization or in their own lives. This has also an important effect to have this consistent increase in supporting creativity. And having said that, this is all from me, Jared.
Oh, thank you, Melody. Wonderful. I'm giving you a round of applause. You lit up the chat box, so great feedback. In fact, I'm going to share one of the last comments that was dropped into the chat box, and it comes from Annika, one of our graduates who is in the Netherlands. She said, and it was obvious, I could see it as well. Love your proud smile at Melodi, Ozyaprak. Such amazing results. As you started, what a true teacher when you started talking about your students like a proud mama. You were just absolutely lighting up. So, Melodi, too many questions to be able to answer, which is a great sign in the 5 or 10 minutes that we have. I'm going to jump to a couple of questions, but knowing that we have limited time, and sort of apologies to our participants, I'm thinking that maybe if you can, because this was a question that came up from Noor, one of our alums from Pakistan. Is it possible to put together, or do you already have a bibliography on some of the research that you were sharing that we can post or send out to our participants? We're not going to get to all of the questions. And for those who have the energy to dive into the research, it might be useful to share the studies that you're basing your comments on. Is that something that you have or you can put together?
Not the Turkish ones, but
Yeah. Okay.
English ones I can share, of course. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Great. Great. So I think this is sort of the crucial question. So I'm going to start with the tough question first. So you highlighted the importance of complex programs. You define what complex programs are in terms of creativity training, but it's not easy to sell complex programs, right? Government agencies, organizations, just hearing the word complex shut down immediately. No, we don't want it to be complex. We don't have time for complicated training programs. So I don't know if you have any tips or suggestions. How do you sell the notion? I can tell you from my own experience, I get emails and phone calls. We think creativity is really, really, really important. We want to promote it in our organization. We appreciate your expertise. Can you come do an hour with us? What? You're going to give me a whole hour?
Yeah.
So how do you sell a complex educational program, a complex training program? We all hear what you're saying. This is the best way to go. But how do you convince others? Do you have any? That's a tough question. So we're starting off. This is not a softball question. This is a tough question.
But I have experienced it, so I can
Okay.
share my
Yes.
experience. I think
Yes.
it's a great question, I think. First of all, we can change the name. We don't need to say it's complex. We can find it easier, simple.
Branding. That's probably smart. Yes.
That's what we can do. But other than that, what we did, we created our own safe spot. We had these resources that we can reach in our university. Our provost was supporting us, and then the first thing to do, finding the right people and doing the network and trying to create your own safe spot that you can do some test drive. That's what we did. We started this program, and then we established this school, and it started very small. When we first started, it was just 12 students. And then after we started, because we already had faith in ourselves and we knew that it was going to work, and we were a spectacular team. Like, we were studying, working from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. So hard working is also another one. And then after we started to practice this theoretical models or curricula, then after we had some good results, we started to advertise it, and if you are doing a good job, people are also advertising on behalf of you. You don't even need to go there and sell your idea, because some students' parents going to say that, oh, we are going to this great school and they are doing this great program, and I observed this and this changes in my student, and the word on the street, like, it goes fast. So one of the things, and of course, we attended conferences. We used all our network as possible, as much as possible, to kind of explain what we are doing. We even showed up in the conferences that wasn't about gifted education. And we just went there, we opened the table, and of course, as we were scholars, we had this publication, so all kind of advertising strategies we use. But I think if you set up a good model, and if you really do a good job, eventually it reaches out to people in need. And after that, you don't even need to explain if the program is complex or not. All you need to do is just keep doing what you are doing, and they just buy it. That was my experience, like, honestly.
From my own experience, and I'm sort of framing these questions around your one of your last slides, where you talked about, or you showed the type of training, domain specific, that you pointed out the trainers are a crucial element, then the organizational setting. I do think, and I appreciate your point about, you could potentially start small and have a pilot and begin to create momentum, a snowball effect. This was my own experience, and one of the best experiences I've ever had with Sheridan College. The other piece of that, I found that allowed us to really dive deep into the training and really position it as organizational change, was the fact that this was woven into a strategic initiative, a direction that the organization wanted to go in anyhow. And it was a component of the vision that the organization had for itself. So tying into momentum already in place, if you can do it, helps, of course. So you're not just selling it as a standalone, the complex training, but it's a means for the organization to achieve some kind of outcome, was what worked for me in my particular situation. So picking up on those two other elements of the three, there were a number of questions around domain-specific training versus general training. And is there, first of all, can you highlight for our audience the difference between the two? So what does domain-specific training mean versus content general approach? And is there, if you're going to weave the two together, which is the better way to start? With general, a general focus, and then move into domain-specific training, or domain-specific, then backing into a more generalized approach so that students can transfer this into all areas of their lives. So what's the difference between domain-specific and content general, and is there a better sequence to how you approach that?
So honestly, the better sequence is the one that fits your situation the most. There is not, I think, there is not a formula that, oh, you should start with domain specific or you should start with domain general. It really depends on your audience, depends on your needs. For example, for me, I was working with mathematically gifted students, and when you are working with mathematically gifted students, you should follow the domain specific, because they're already ahead of their peers. They're already advanced in math, and then for them, just focusing solely of domain general strategies is not very meaningful, because they want to do math, and they meant to be doing math. So for that particular group, it was obvious that domain-specific creativity should have been the focus, because for example, there are some differences with the domain general strategies. These are all the strategies, all the thinking skills that we are all aware of: convergent thinking, divergent thinking, brainstorming, scamper, creative problem solving. But like with the domain-specific, for example, I'm going to give an example in math, because someone asked. For the math, for example, making associations. We use making associations to be able to create in math. This is something that isn't similar. But for example, in math creativity, we have selective thinking. And selective thinking means that like students should be able to kind of grasp the criteria for a solution and for being valuable in math. So this is solely math-based. When we talk about math creativity, we want them to be able to be selective among the ideas or solutions or theories or proofs in math. Another one, for example, for math, appreciation of simplicity or aesthetics in mathematical solutions. So this is not something you can teach them with domain general. You have to know the content that you are teaching, and you have to know the criteria of being aesthetic in math, and this is how we work. I remember when we were writing the first math curriculum for gifted students in Turkey, we had a team, and then we were discussing with the mathematicians about analogies, because I was explaining them what analogies are, and they were refusing that math had analogies. So they said, we don't have analogies in math. It took us for a while. I'm like, you do. When you are solving a problem, if you go and ask your students to find similar analogous problems, then you are using analogy. And they are like, it took a while for them to be able to understand, because what we are doing, because we didn't have the same
Right.
vocabulary,
Yeah.
So these are the basic differences. What with the domain general, with the domain specific, what I always tell the people I study with or I teach, you should go and find a beautiful eminence in your field. For example, the science, go to Richard Feynman, because he was very famous being creative, and he was using as far association techniques as deliberate.
Right.
He had two balls on his desk. One ball had this notes about some random concepts from daily life, and the other one was full of this physics concept. And every day, deliberately, he was going there, selecting two notes from two different balls, putting them together, and trying to find association.
Really? Wow. Interesting.
So I always tell them, go and find some eminent people in your field and read their autobiography, biography, or do the work they did. Because if you are working with people who want to be experts in a certain domain, they will understand what these eminents are talking about. And try to understand as an expert, as a eminent expert, what they did differently, you know. Because to be expert, you require to gain some conceptual and practical skills, but to be a creative expert, you require additional skills, you know. And the best way to find it is just to go and then understand these people's thinking and what they are saying. So that was my suggestion. So this is the kind of the main difference between domain specific and domain general.
Yeah. Well, and I think, go ahead.
We want them, want them to create, to be able to come to a mind state which allow them to create new information in their field. This is the main definition of domain specific creativity, or using the existing methods, existing strategies, or existing information to using them differently, finding some new implications of the strategies or informations. And this is exactly what Guilford say in his model. The implication part was exactly this: writing a different ending to the field, or like coming up with a different, interesting and unique approach with the implications. So you don't have to create new knowledge, but you should be aware of what's going in that domain, and you should try to make new arrangements and alterations to be able to apply those that information, if that makes sense. It's really difficult to explain this in
No, I appreciate it. In fact, you know, there are many more questions. We're unfortunately out of time, many more questions than we're able to get to. And you'll have a chance after the keynote, when the Zoom sessions closed out, to see what the reactions were and comments. You stimulated a lot of dialogue in the chat box, and I encourage people to continue, because the chat box will be saved to provide feedback to Melodi. And I think in your answer to the last question, there was an additional question I was going to ask, because you touched on it in your final slide about the importance of the trainer and the teacher. And it sounds like you did a lot of coaching to help prepare the teacher trainer to have the right mindset to deliver, because that's so crucial. And I think, unfortunately, in the US, especially in teacher education programs, we don't spend enough time, any time, talking about what creativity is. And I think we need to do much more of that, and would love to see that woven into all teacher education programs. So Melodi, want to thank you so much for sharing your expertise. I think our community is embracing you warmly. I saw many comments about what a wonderful addition you are to our team. And those interested in our doctoral program will be talking more about that during the State of the Center that Dr. Firestein referenced. And one of the key reasons why Melodi was hired was to help support our doctoral program. You could see and hear her expertise in research. So thank you very much. Thank you so much for your presentation, Melodi. And well, thank you. And so let's see where we are in the program. I'm going to share my screen and resize this window pane so that you can focus in on the slide. So here we are, coming up against our meal break from 11:30 to 12:15, though. For those of you interested in an informal discussion with Dr. Joe Udis and myself, in the chat box, you've been provided with a document that takes you to various links. This includes the informal conversation during the meal break. If you wish to give up your meal break and sit with Joe and I and have a delightful conversation about our graduate program, we invite you to do that. We're back for block one of our concurrent sessions, 12:15 to 1 o'clock New York time zone. Again, you have the links to those sessions from 1 to 1:15. Again, that's our local New York time. There's a 15-minute break, and then we go into block two. We wrap up the day and our leap year creativity expert exchange from 2 to 2:15 in our concurrent sessions. And then, as you were encouraged by Dr. Firestein, we invite you to join our after CEE session to hear about center updates and faculty updates. That's going to be in the main room, the room that we're in now. So this is the last time I'll have a chance to address the full audience. I want to call out a number of people and say a special thank you to Kristen Peterson, adjunct faculty member, and also we call her the concurrent session wrangler. She reaches out and uses her powers of persuasion to draw in concurrent session presenters, and then powers of persuasion to get moderators to serve as hosts for those sessions. She does this in a voluntary capacity. It takes hours of effort, and so I want to express my deep appreciation to Kristen Peterson. Also want to thank Dr. David Yates, who is our instructional technology expert. Again, he does this voluntarily. You know, for those of you who've done conferences, it takes tremendous energy and expertise to make sure that all the technology works well, and I want to thank Dr. David Yates. We have a highly competent graduate assistant, Maddie McDaniel, who is just super efficient, incredibly organized, and just well-versed with technology. She created the Eventbrite site. She created the program booklet. So I would encourage you to drop little thank you notes in the chat box for any of these individuals, but I wanted to call them out and shine a light on each one of them. Of course, thank all of the faculty. I thank the concurrent session presenters for their contributions to a very successful event. So upcoming events, we started this year, I'm going to go in reverse order, our mini C 1 hour presentations. The next one, I'll be delivering the topic to be determined, depending on several factors, including how quickly SUNY evaluates and renders a decision about our proposed doctoral program. That's going to be on April 18. If it's not related to the doctoral program, it'll be related to some other research that I'm working on, either on creative leadership or on foresight. So the topic is to be determined, and we're going to shift from what has been our pattern to do that over the noon hour here in our New York time zone to an evening presentation. Prior to that, Dr. Sue Keller-Mathers, who will say more about this in our after C faculty and center updates. We're going to be hosting on March 13, 1 hour virtual session to celebrate Dr. Ruth Knoller. And then on March 22nd, for those interested in our graduate program, we're going to hold a formal, think about it like as an open house information session. We've been dropping in the chat box the Eventbrite link for that session. That's scheduled for March 22. This is a virtual session from 4 to 5 o'clock in the New York time zone. If you want to stay connected to us, here are several ways to do that. Encourage you to follow us in Facebook, and then you have the URL to learn more about our distance program, but also, of course, in our Center for Applied Imagination website, there are a number of ways to stay connected with our department. And that brings our morning to a close. I invite you to join our informal graduate program chat in a separate room, and then our concurrent sessions, block 1 and 2, this afternoon, New York time. Thank you, everyone. You can hang out in the main room if you wish and network with one another as well. And we encourage you to do that. I'm going to dash off to the informal grad program discussion. I'll see some of you also this afternoon in the concurrent sessions. Take care, all.